Every decade, the United States sees the rise of at least one electronic gadget. Sometime between the start of a decade and the end, that tech penetrates 50% of American households. In other words, it goes from most people not having it to them getting it. Here they are in chronological order. 1920s, electricity. Ben Franklin was sending lightning through wires before America was founded. Nikola Tesla patented alternating current power transmission in 1888, but it took until the 1920s for the majority of American households to be wired with electricity. This allowed the electronics boom to begin. 1930s, radio. While radio had been around since 1897, it was mostly used by naval and commercial ships for sending Morse code. Audio broadcasts began in 1906, but it took until the 1930s for radio's golden age to begin. With the country in the throes of the Great Depression, radio was a source of cheap entertainment. From the comedy of Jack Benny to the drama of Orson Welles, plus the rise of swing jazz and lurid news reports of bank robberies, Americans from coast to coast were all listening to the same programs. President Franklin Roosevelt's fireside chats tried to bring a weary nation together while the fascist rantings of Father Charles Coughlin tried to tear it apart. And it was all free, thanks to the deep pockets of corporate sponsors. 1940s, telephone. Alexander Graham Bell was awarded the patent in 1876, but most Americans didn't get a telephone until the 1940s. Unlike today's phones, which can do almost anything, phones of the 1940s only did the one thing today's phones do the least: voice calls. Before telephones, the word calling meant visiting. The only way to converse in real time was in person. But once everyone had a phone, Americans could have active social lives without leaving home. In those days, a phone call required a professional operator. You would call the operator and she, as they were almost always women, would connect you to your intended party. In the 1940s, the number of operators peaked at 350,000, providing employment opportunities for women before automation slowly replaced them. 1950s, television. Adoption of television went from 9% to 90% during the decade. Philo T. Farnsworth perfected television in 1927, but RCA's David Sarnoff suppressed it until patents expired. World War II further delayed production. Poor reception in rural areas was solved in 1948 by John Walson's invention of the community antenna, the forerunner of cable. On January 19, 1953, the episode Lucy Goes to the Hospital was watched by 72% of American households. 1960s, hi-fi stereo. The phonograph was invented in 1877, and the gramophone improved it in the 1890s. By the 1960s, the big innovation was high-fidelity stereophonic sound. Though invented in 1954, stereo went from 2% to 99% of record sales in the 60s. Embraced by artists like the Beatles and the Beach Boys, hi-fi stereos were a must for any music fan. 1970s, citizens band radio. The 1970s may not have had a tech that reached 50% saturation. The closest example was Citizens Band, CB, radio. Previously used commercially, mainly by truckers, CB became a consumer fad in the 1970s. By the end of the decade, 23% of Americans had a CB license, up from 1%, and many more likely used them unlicensed. Handles, lingo, and eavesdropping became cultural touchstones. 1980s, microwave and videocassette recorder. The 1980s had two major gadgets: the microwave oven, 80% penetration, and the videocassette recorder, 66%. These fit the go-go 80s lifestyle. Late hours meant nuked dinners and taped shows. Video rental shops gave films a second life, and latchkey kids could manage a hot meal and Return of the Jedi on repeat. 1990s, personal computer. Home computers had existed since the 1970s, with a small surge in the 1980s. But the 1993 launch of the World Wide Web changed everything. The internet became user-friendly, with America Online offering guided experiences, email, chat rooms, news groups, and message boards. Fear of missing out drove mass adoption. 2000s, digital camera. Since the Kodak Brownie of 1900, cameras had relied on film. Digital photography finally replaced chemical film in the 2000s. Built-in screens allowed instant review and reshooting without cost. Americans en masse switched from film to digital, until the next decade rendered stand-alone cameras obsolete. 2010s, smartphone. The 2007 iPhone launched the smartphone revolution. Smartphones quickly supplanted landlines, cameras, radios, televisions, stereos, CBs, and even personal computers for many users. Their ubiquity and versatility makes it difficult to predict what could replace them. 2020s, the next big thing. The present decade is still unfolding, but a few contenders are emerging. Smart speakers and home assistants, Amazon Echo, Google Home, have become common. Electric vehicles are gaining momentum, especially as charging infrastructure spreads. Virtual reality and augmented reality headsets continue to improve. Wearables like smartwatches and fitness trackers are widespread, but not yet at the level of smartphones. Whether one of these will pass the 50% threshold before 2030 remains to be seen, but history suggests that some technology will capture the American imagination and households en masse, just as every decade before.